Good morning. It's Jeffrey Christian of CPM Group. It's 10 minutes after 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 23rd of July here in New York. Well, a lot of ground I want to cover today. I wanted to talk about central bank gold demand, recent trends in it, and related to that, investment demand trends. These are probably the two most important factors in gold and investment demand in silver. Speaking about what we should talk about this morning here at CPM Group, the political environment was obviously deemed as being very important. Said, on the one hand, I'd like to focus on the fundamentals of the precious metals markets. On the other hand, I understand that the political environment is probably more critical and of greater interest to more people at this point. Investment demand and to some extent central bank demand, I guess it plays off of and grows out of that macroeconomic and political world that includes U.S. politics. We had a very cathartic week last week through Sunday of today, this week. And I had said on Friday that I thought that things might have changed over the weekend by the time we get here, and they have. I hesitant a little bit to talk about politics because there are always people who take umbrage at anything and they make all sorts of bad assumptions. But that said, I think the political environment is such that we really have to pay attention to it. So let's try to go through this stuff as fast as possible. Last Friday's video was was titled "Investing in an Extremely Volatile Markets." Let's add to that, extremely volatile markets and an extremely volatile world. This is a bubble chart that we update every month in our Precious Metals Advisory. This is from the early July Precious Metals Advisory. And so it's as of the beginning of July, our view. You can't really read this probably on your screen, but each bubble, the green bubbles are bad things that are good for gold prices. Political risks, global economics, recession, defaults in commercial banking areas. The yellow are kind of neutral, and the red are positive for the world, kind of negative for gold. So we're seeing these bubbles get bigger, and they're moving more to the right, which means that they are more having are expected to have a bigger effect on gold and silver prices than if they were to the left more. And they're also moving up, which means that the probability in CPM Group's view and our projections and modeling that these things will be problematic for the world and positive for gold and silver prices is greater for the next 6 months than it would be if they were lower on the chart. Bottom line is, this is a graphic way of saying, yes, we are in an extremely volatile world in an extremely volatile time. And that's going to continue for some time. It is the key factor that has been driving investors to buy more gold and silver, and driving gold prices to record prices, and driving silver prices to higher prices. I should say that gold is $2,404 as I speak for the nearby active August COMEX contract. And silver, which is a September COMEX contract, is around $29.20 as I speak. Platinum and palladium are down in the mid-900s. Let's talk about official purchases. Everyone knows that central banks are buying more gold. And this, as you can see, the yellow part is gross additions, green is net gross reductions or sales. Gross sales declined toward 2010, and gross purchases began to pick up sharply around 2008, 2009 during the global financial crisis and the Great Recession. The line is the net, and net on basis, central banks have been buying about 10 million ounces a year, 10, 12 million ounces a year since 2008. 2023, they bought about 14, not quite 14 million ounces. This year, we have them projected to come down. Here, that's around 14 million ounces on a gross basis. It's about 10 million ounces on a net basis. But if we look at it on a monthly basis, central banks have pulled back from buying. This goes through May, but the trend continued in July and August as gold prices met new highs. Central banks have pulled back from purchasing as the price rose. And there have been some increases in sales, not necessarily because of the higher price, but in the big case, which I'll talk about in a second, because Russia needed money. Everyone knows the People's Bank of China is buying gold, or do they? Yes, the People's Bank of China, the Central Bank of China, has been buying gold. It has been adding to its gold reserves since around 2008, 2010, 2009 to be exact. This is just through January. You can see they were not buying into late January. They 2022. They restarted purchasing gold in November of 2022, and they have been consistent buyers to some extent. If you look at it on a monthly basis, you can see here again, they didn't start buying until November of 2022. They bought about 1 million ounces, a little bit more in November of 22, a little bit less than 1 million ounces in December of 22, and the amount has been declining. They bought a lot of gold that was surplus in the gold private market in China over the course of 2023. By late 2023, a lot of that gold had been absorbed either by the People's Bank of China or private entities that started buying gold again in November and December of 2022. The People's Bank of China did not buy gold in May, and I don't believe they bought gold in June either. They're very price sensitive. They buy when the price is right. Russia is another central bank that has been very active in the gold market. And this just starts in January 2022, and it covers the period of time when Russia had invaded Ukraine and started the war on Ukraine. And you can see that it's been quite variable, the amounts that they have in their reserves. If you look at it on a monthly basis, you can see there have been just as many months that they've been sellers of gold from their reserves as they have been buying. Basically, Russia's economy is now about 40% based on financing the war effort. And the central bank is pretty much hard up for cash. It's had a lot of its non-gold assets that it stored overseas frozen once it attacked Ukraine. And so it is basically using its gold reserves to finance the government and the war effort. There are months when they are net buyers, mostly in the domestic market, mostly from domestic refined production, either from scrap or from mine production. And there are months when they're net sellers, as was the case in May, when they sold almost 2 million ounces in order to raise cash for the government. So that's continuing on. Taking a look at the private sector, central banks are not the only value investors. And we've seen investors, shorter-term investors, and some long-term investors who invest through gold ETFs. They were net sellers on a total basis in 2021, 2022, and again in 2023. They were net sellers in early 2024. After April, they started buying, and they've been buying a little bit, not a lot. They're very opportunistic. They started buying in April as the gold price started moving to new highs above $2,400 an ounce. but they pulled back a little bit in the last several weeks. So too with gold coin buyers. Gold coin sales by the U.S. Mint are off 64% through the first half of this year. Price sensitivity, basically. We saw about 1 million ounces of gold purchased by investors or by dealers from the U.S. Mint for sale to the investors in the first half of last year, and about 360,000 ounces this year in the first half. So a lot of price sensitivity in gold among investors. Silver investors are buying less bullion, but more coins. So their coin sales from the U.S. Mint are up about 46% this year compared to the first half of last year. But on an overall basis, bullion bar sales and non-U.S. Mint coin sales are down, and down sharply. That's the state of the precious metals investment demand central banks. I want to talk a little bit about living in the political world. We have seen some changes in the U.S. election in the past week. Frankly, I think that the choice of J.D. Vance as the vice presidential candidate on the Republican side is very interesting. I think that we will see several surprises related to J.D. Vance between now and Election Day. Whether those surprises are sprung by the Democrats or by the Republicans, it remains to be seen. There are people within the Republican Party who are not happy with his choice. But I guess the choice is made, the die is cast, and they probably won't change horses in midstream. People who change horses in midstream are the Democrats. We've seen Kamala Harris now as the appointed replacement for Joe Biden. Biden clearly has some cognitive issues. I want to say it's not ageism. In 2019, I did a 3-hour conversation with Alan Greenspan. I believe he was 93 at the time, and he was sharp as a pin. He was one of the 2 smartest people in the room over that 3-hour conversation, which actually continued then after we turned off the recording devices. It continued over lunch. It's not ageism. It's cognitive capacities that are the key issue with Joseph Biden. And it's interesting now with the switch to Kamala Harris. It's going to be completely change the dynamics of the election over the next 104 days. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. On the GOP side, there are a couple things to notice. One is that the GOP has prepared complaints to submit to the courts seeking to freeze the voting results in all 50 states. They have prepared to say that in all 50 states, the fraud was so great on the part of the Democrats that they want to freeze the election results 104 days before the election. They know how to play their game, which is not straight elections. Recently, the Republican-controlled Ohio election board deregistered 2%, 160,000 people who were registered voters were thrown off of the rolls because they haven't voted recently enough. There's an anti-voting movement there. I think that what you're going to see now is the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has threatened it. The GOP may well seek injunctions on the delegate switch in all 50 states, the Democratic switch of delegates from being pledged to Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. There's absolutely no legal ground for that claim, but if you seek a temporary injunction, you can delay the Democratic campaign at least a week or so, And you might find some interesting judges who would actually grant those injunctions. I should also point out that in Ohio and various other states, the Republican-controlled election boards have been placing their certification date before the Democratic convention's date so as to sort of force the Democrats' hands to do that. And I want to say something else, because various tampons will tell you that I am a Democrat. I am not a Democrat. I'm an independent, as are 51% of the voters in America. 51% of the voters in America identify themselves as independent. They don't like Democrats, and they don't like these days what the Republican Party has become. One of the major problems with the United States is, I heard somebody use this term on the weekend, the political industrial complex. We have really large corporations and economic entities that run and control and benefit from the Republican and Democratic parties. And one of the major problems we have in the United States, democratically and politically and socially, is that we have bipartisanship on the part of choosing people to be on electoral boards on a state and on a local level. They should be nonpartisan. It shouldn't be the Democrats and Republicans dividing up the ability to choose things and to set districts and things like that. It should all be nonpartisan, as it is in many other industrialized democratic countries. So we have a problem there. And the GOP is much more adept at exploiting those weaknesses in our system than are the Democrats. But it's going to be an interesting time. Now, why am I talking about politics? The politics are very important for a domestic economy and the world economy, and for the overall peace and prosperity of the political system and the global economy. Global trade is one of the biggest drivers in economic growth, and it has been being starved for the last 20 years, 18 to 20 years, across Republican and Democratic governments in the United States. And it's not just their fault. Other countries' governments have contributed to the contraction and the constraints placed on global trade and economic activity in general. The political environment, unfortunately, has a lot to say about the global and U.S. economy and also society. And those factors all come together to say, investors, do you want to buy less or more gold and silver? And it's those investors' decisions as to whether they look at the world politically, economically, socially, financial market stability, and they say, I think I should buy more, or I think I should buy less gold and silver. I think I should have more of my wealth in gold and silver, or less gold and silver. These political factors are integral and inseparable with the analysis as to whether or not investment demand is going to rise or fall and push prices higher or lower for gold and silver. So, as odious as the political system is, we have to pay attention to it. That's all I have for now. Take care of yourself. Take care of those around you. Try to do something nice for the world. And let's see where we go. Talk to you on Friday.